The Last Supper, the autumn rain, drummed against the concrete like 1,000 tiny hammers, each drop carrying the bitter promise of another cold night ahead. Emma Rodriguez pulled her threadbare jacket tighter around her shoulders as she huddled. Beneath the flickering neon sign of Tony's all-night diner, the red and blue lights cast strange shadows across her face, highlighting the exhaustion that had become her constant companion these past 8 months. At 28, Emma had once been a promising art teacher at Lincoln Elementary School. Her students had loved her creative lessons, and her small apartment had been filled with their colorful drawings taped to every wall. But that life felt like a distant dream now, buried beneath an avalanche of medical bills from her mother's cancer treatment and the crushing weight of circumstances beyond her control. The paper bag in her lap contained her treasure for the day. Half a turkey sandwich from the diner's generous cook, Marco, who sometimes slipped her leftover food when his manager wasn't looking. The sandwich was slightly stale, and the lettuce had seen better days, but to Emma, it was a feast. Her stomach had been empty for nearly 2 days, save for the bitter coffee she'd nursed earlier that morning using quarters she'd found in a payphone coin return. She unwrapped the sandwich carefully, treating it like precious cargo. The smell of turkey and mayonnaise made her mouth water, and she closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the anticipation. This would be her only meal today, and she knew she needed to eat slowly to make it last, to trick her body into feeling satisfied. As she lifted the sandwich to her lips, a movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. Across the narrow alley, partially hidden in the shadows between 2 dumpsters, sat a man. He was older than her, maybe in his 40s, with salt and pepper hair that stuck out at odd angles. His clothes were expensive once upon a time, she could tell that much. The wool coat he wore probably cost more than she'd made in a month back when she had a job. But now it was wrinkled and stained, hanging loose on his thin frame. What struck her most were his eyes. Even from this distance, even in the dim light, she could see they held the same hollow look she recognized in her own reflection. The look of someone who had lost everything that mattered. The man hadn't noticed her yet. He sat with his back against the brick wall, staring at nothing, his hands hanging limply at his sides. Emma could see his lips moving slightly, as if he were having a conversation with someone who wasn't there. She'd seen that before, too, during her months on the streets. Sometimes talking to yourself was the only way to feel less alone. Emma looked down at her sandwich, then back at the man. Her stomach clenched with hunger, reminding her that she hadn't eaten in days. Every rational part of her mind screamed that she needed this food, that she couldn't afford to be generous when she had nothing left to give. But there was something about the way he sat there, so utterly defeated, that made her chest tighten with recognition. Before she could talk herself out of it, Emma stood up. Her legs were stiff from sitting on the cold concrete, and she stumbled slightly as she crossed the alley. The man looked up as she approached, his eyes widening with surprise and wariness. "Excuse me, Emma," said softly, her voice hoarse from disuse. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I noticed you sitting here and I wondered if you might be hungry." The man blinked slowly, as if processing her words was difficult. Up close, she could see that he was younger than she'd initially thought, probably in his late 30s. His face was gaunt, with sharp cheekbones and dark circles under his eyes. But there was something else there too, something that didn't quite fit with his current circumstances. An intelligence, a depth that spoke of better times. "I don't have any money," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma smiled, though it felt strange on her face after so many days of wearing nothing but worry. "I'm not asking for money. I have this sandwich, and I thought maybe you'd like to share it with me." She held out the paper bag, and the man stared at it as if she were offering him a bar of gold. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for it, then stopped. "I can't take your food," he said, shaking his head. "You need it more than I do." Emma almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Here they were, 2 people who clearly had nothing, each trying to sacrifice for the other. "What's your name?" she asked instead. The man hesitated. "Benjamin," he said finally. "Benjamin Sterling. I'm Emma Rodriguez." She sat down beside him on the cold ground, uninvited but somehow knowing he wouldn't object. "And I think we both need it equally," Benjamin Sterling. So how about we share? She unwrapped the sandwich and carefully tore it in half, making sure each piece was as equal as possible. The turkey fell out of one side and she redistributed it between the halves with the same care a surgeon might use during an operation. Here, she said, offering him the slightly larger half. I insist. Benjamin stared at the sandwich half in his hands, and Emma saw something crack in his expression. His shoulders began to shake and she realized he was crying. Not the loud, dramatic tears she'd expected, but quiet ones that spoke of a pain so deep it had nowhere else to go. When was the last time you ate? Emma asked gently. 3 days, Benjamin whispered. Maybe 4. Time gets ... confused. Emma nodded. She understood. Time became fluid when you were hungry, when you were cold, when you were invisible to the world rushing past you on the sidewalk. They ate in silence, both of them taking small bites, making the food last. Emma found herself studying Benjamin's profile as he chewed. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't place what it was. Maybe it was just the universal look of someone who had fallen from grace, the particular way that former prosperity left its mark even in poverty. Hey, this is the best sandwich I've ever had, Benjamin said suddenly, and Emma could hear that he meant it. Marco makes good sandwiches, Emma agreed. He's the cook at Tony's. Sometimes he sets aside food that would otherwise get thrown away. You know him well? Emma shrugged. As well as you can know someone when you're living like this. He's kind. There aren't many kind people left in the world. Benjamin looked at her then, really looked at her, and Emma felt herself being studied with an intensity that made her self-conscious. You're wrong about that, he said quietly. You're sitting here sharing your only meal with a stranger. Yes. The kindest thing anyone has done for me in longer than I can remember. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. It's just a sandwich. No, Benjamin said, his voice growing stronger. It's not just a sandwich, it's hope. It's proof that people like you still exist in this world. They finished eating, and Benjamin carefully folded the empty wrapper, tucking it into his coat pocket as if it were something precious. Emma understood. When you had nothing, everything became meaningful. Can I ask you something? Benjamin said. Emma nodded. How did you end up here? On the streets, I mean. You don't seem like... you seem educated. You speak well. Emma was quiet for a long moment, watching a stray cat pick through the garbage near the dumpster. My mother got sick, she said finally. Cancer. I was teaching elementary school, but the insurance didn't cover everything. I used my savings. Then I started borrowing against my credit cards. When she died, I couldn't afford the funeral and the medical bills and my rent. I lost my apartment first, then my job when I couldn't keep up appearances anymore. I'm sorry, Benjamin said, and Emma could hear that he meant it. What about you? She asked. Benjamin was quiet for so long that Emma thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I made some very bad decisions, he said. I trusted the wrong people. I lost everything that mattered to me, including myself. Emma wanted to ask more, but something in his tone warned her away from pressing. Instead, she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small battered notebook and a pencil stub. What's that? Benjamin asked. I keep a journal, Emma said, feeling slightly embarrassed. I know it sounds silly, but I write down good things when they happen, so I don't forget that they exist. She opened the notebook to a fresh page and wrote, Shared sandwich with Benjamin Sterling. Still kindness in the world. Benjamin watched. Her right, his expression unreadable. May I see that? Emma hesitated, then handed him the notebook. Benjamin flipped through the pages, reading her careful entries. Found $5 in coat pocket. Marco gave me soup. Watched sunrise from bridge. Beautiful. You find hope in small things? Benjamin observed. Small things are all I have left, Emma replied. But sometimes small things are enough. Benjamin handed the notebook back to her, and when their fingers touched, Emma felt something pass between them. Not romantic exactly, but a recognition. An understanding that they were both survivors of storms that had nearly destroyed them. Thank you, Emma Rodriguez, Benjamin said, for the sandwich, and for reminding me that kindness still exists. Thank you to Benjamin Sterling, Emma replied, for sharing it with me. Food tastes better when you're not eating alone. As the rain continued to fall around them, neither of them moved to leave. For the first time in months, Emma didn't feel entirely alone in the world. And Benjamin, whose real story was far more complicated than Emma could ever imagine, felt something he hadn't experienced in over a year. He felt human again. The revelation the next morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of dampness that seeped through every layer of clothing and settled in your bones. Emma woke up in the doorway of an abandoned bookstore, her joints aching from sleeping on concrete. The cardboard she'd used as a mattress had absorbed moisture from the ground, leaving her feeling clammy and stiff. But despite the discomfort, she found herself thinking about Benjamin Sterling and their shared meal. There had been something different about their encounter, something that lingered in her mind like a half-remembered melody. She pulled out her battered notebook and read the entry she'd written the night before. Smiling despite her circumstances, Emma spent the morning walking the streets, looking. For Benjamin, without really admitting to herself, that's what she was doing. She told herself she was just following her usual routine, checking the places where she might find discarded bottles to return for deposit money, or perhaps another lucky coin return in a payphone. It was nearly noon when she spotted him sitting on a bench in Meridian Park, staring at the pond where a few hardy ducks paddled through the gray water. He looked even more disheveled in the daylight, his expensive coat now clearly showing its wear and stains. But there was something different about his posture today, less defeated than the night before. "Benjamin?" Emma called softly as she approached. He looked up, and his face broke into what might have been the first genuine smile he'd worn in months. "Emma, I hoped I might see you again." She sat beside him on the bench, noting how he shifted slightly to make room for her. "How did you sleep?" "Poorly," he admitted, "but better than I have in weeks." Strange how a single act of kindness can change your entire perspective. Emma felt that familiar warmth in her chest, the same feeling she used to get when one of her students finally grasped a difficult concept. "I've been thinking about what you said last night," she said, "about trusting the wrong people." Benjamin was quiet for a moment, watching the ducks. "Do you ever think about the sliding doors moments in your life?" he asked. "The single decisions that change everything?" "Every day," Emma replied honestly. "Mine happened 18 months ago," Benjamin said. "I had a business partner, someone I considered my closest friend. We'd built something incredible together, a technology company that was changing how people communicate. We were on the verge of going public, worth hundreds of millions on paper." Emma blinked, trying to process what he was telling her. "Hundreds of millions?" Benjamin nodded, his expression bitter. "My partner, David Chen, came to me with concerns about our lead programmer. Said he'd discovered she was selling our proprietary code to competitors. He had evidence, documents, recordings. I was devastated, not just about the betrayal, but because I'd personally recruited her, vouched for her." "What did you do?" "I fired her immediately, had her arrested. The scandal broke just as we were about to go public. Investors fled, clients canceled contracts. But that wasn't the worst part." Benjamin's hands clenched into fists. 2 months later, I discovered that David had fabricated everything. The evidence, the recordings, all of it. He'd been the one selling our code, and he'd used her as a scapegoat. While he prepared to push me out of the company entirely, Emma felt sick to her stomach. That's horrible. By the time I figured it out, it was too late. He'd convinced the board I was mentally unstable, paranoid. They voted me out of my own company. The programmer I'd wrongfully accused sued me personally for defamation and wrongful termination. I lost everything fighting the legal battles. My house, my cars, my savings, everything. But surely you could prove David was lying. Benjamin laughed. But there was no humor in it. Proving and convincing are two different things. David was always better at politics than I was, better at making people believe what he wanted them to believe. And He trailed off, staring at his hands. I fell apart, started drinking, stopped taking care of myself. Even the few people who might have believed me eventually gave up when I became too much trouble to support. Emma sat in stunned silence, trying to reconcile this story with the broken man beside her. What was the name of your company? Sterling Chun Technologies, Benjamin said. Maybe you've heard of it. They make those communication apps that everyone uses now. It's worth about $3 billion, last I checked. Emma's breath caught. Had heard of Sterling Chun Technologies. Everyone had. Their messaging platform was used by millions of people worldwide. You're that Benjamin Sterling? Was Benjamin corrected? Now I'm just another homeless man who used to be somebody. Emma stared at him, her mind reeling. The man she'd shared her sandwich with. The man she'd seen as a fellow victim of circumstance. It's actually the co-founder of one of the most successful tech companies in the world, or had been. Why didn't you tell me last night? She asked Benjamin. Met her eyes. Would it have changed how you treated me? Emma considered the question honestly. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe, probably. That's why I didn't tell you. For the first time in over a year, someone looked at me and saw just a person who needed help. Not a cautionary tale, not a symbol of fallen pride, just another human being who was hungry. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened to you, and I'm sorry people treated you that way. Don't be sorry, Benjamin said. Be proud. What you did last night, sharing your food with a stranger, that's worth more than all the money I ever had. That's real wealth. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the ducks paddle around the pond. Emma found herself reassessing everything she thought she knew about success, about failure, about the distance between the two. What are you going to do now? She asked finally. Benjamin shrugged. I don't know. For the longest time, I've been focused on just surviving each day. I haven't thought much beyond that. Emma pulled out her notebook again and flipped to a blank page. Can I show you something? She began writing, and Benjamin watched as words appeared on the paper. Benjamin Sterling shared his story. Sometimes falling down is the first step too. Finding who you really are? You really believe that? Benjamin asked. I have to, Emma said, because the alternative is giving up entirely, and I can't do that. I won't do that. Benjamin studied her face, seeing something there that he'd lost sight of in himself. You know what's funny? He said. I spent years building a company designed to connect people, to help them communicate better. I never really learned how to connect with people myself. Not until last night. Maybe that's your next chapter, Emma suggested. It's not building technology to connect people, but actually connecting with them. Maybe, Benjamin said thoughtfully. Maybe it is. As the afternoon wore on, they talked about dreams deferred and hopes abandoned, about the difference between having everything and having enough. Benjamin spoke about the isolation of wealth, how success had insulated him from real human connection. Emma talked about the clarity that poverty had brought her, the way losing everything had helped her understand what truly mattered. I need to tell you something, Benjamin said as the sun began to set. I wasn't entirely honest with you. Emma felt her stomach drop. What do you mean? I'm not completely broke, Benjamin admitted. I have a trust fund that my grandfather set up, one that David couldn't touch. It's not much by my old standards, maybe $50,000, but it's enough to get me back on my feet if I wanted. To use it? Emma stared at him. And why are you living on the streets? Because I was ashamed, Benjamin said quietly. Ashamed that I'd let myself fall so far. Ashamed that I'd been so blind, so foolish. I felt like I deserved to suffer for my mistakes. And now. Benjamin looked at her, really looked at her, and Emma saw something new in his eyes. Not the hollow despair of the night before, but something warmer, something that looked like hope. I think maybe suffering isn't the same thing as learning, he said. And maybe I've learned enough. Emma reached over and took his hand. What will you do? First, I'm going to get us both a hotel room for the night, Benjamin said. With hot showers and room service and clean sheets. And then tomorrow, I'm going to start figuring out how to build something new. Something better. Us, Emma asked, her heart skipping. If you'll let me, Benjamin said. You gave me back my humanity, Emma Rodriguez. The least I can do is share my second chance with you. Emma thought about all the entries in her notebook, all the small kindnesses she'd recorded to keep hope alive. This felt bigger than those moments, more significant. It felt like the beginning of something she'd never dared to imagine. "Yes," she said simply. That night, as they sat in a warm hotel room, eating their first real meal in months, Emma made a new entry in her notebook. Benjamin Sterling kept his promise. Sometimes the best investments are the ones you make in people. At Benjamin, looking at this remarkable woman who had saved him with nothing more than half a sandwich and an open heart, realized that he'd finally learned the most important lesson of his life. True. Wealth wasn't measured in dollars or stocks or company valuations. It was measured in the willingness to share what you have, no matter how little that might be. Their story was just beginning.